Israel has a wine production heritage that goes back to biblical times. But for most of the past 2,000 years, you would be hard-pressed to find a bottle of wine made in the Holy Land. But that all began to change in the mid-1900s. And today, Israel has over 300 wineries that produce some of the best wine in the world. How did Israel's wine experience such an unlikely resurgence? Well, today on the Game Changers Forum, we're going to uncork this story with an organization dedicated to sharing the flavors of Israel one bottle at a time. Hey everyone, I am super excited to have Daniel Elliott with Israeli Good Wine with us today. So Daniel's actually in Israel right now. He'll tell us a little bit about what's going on there, but really great to have you on the Game Changers Forum, Daniel. How are you?
Man, I'm doing well. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for having me, and it's an honor to be with you guys, streaming here from the Golan Heights in Israel.
Yeah, awesome. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about what you're doing there and kind of what's happening. But hey, man, I absolutely love wine from Israel, so I'm like into it today. I wore my wine-colored shirt for this episode, and then of course this bottle right here you may recognize because you and your wife Elena gave me this, Kara and I, this bottle of wine when we saw you in Nashville. So we're definitely we're saving this, of course, because Kara's pregnant, so we can't drink this together until for a couple more months. But man, love that. And so we're here in I'm in Atlanta, you're in Israel, and we're not far from the Georgia wine country here in Atlanta. It's up in North Georgia, but it does nothing compares to Israeli wine. I absolutely love it. So we're going to get into, of course, the history of wine in the Holy Land. But first, I want folks to get to know you and your organization a little bit. Of course, Israeli Good Wine, which of course they can go to the website as well to learn more. But I think it's pretty cool, man. I met you when you and Elena were first launching Israeli Good Wine, and now it's like you guys are running full throttle now for a while, and just super excited for you. So why don't we just kind of start there? How did you guys get interested in Israel wine and then even start this organization?
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me on. We're really blessed to know you guys. We loved you guys from the moment. Well, I met you first before I met Kara, but just Alana and I both really love your heart, and it's an honor to be with you and to get to share some of this with you guys. So our journey was really had nothing to do with wine. It was all tied into Israel. Mm-hmm. And that's where it started for me in 2010. I made my first trip here, and over the years was able to come back multiple times. I ended up living in Jerusalem for 3 months, studied the Bible, and really got to delve deep into the roots of my faith as a follower and a believer in Yeshua. And so I've actually been in construction for 16 years. Which everyone's like, how did a guy in construction end up getting into wine? Well, let's just say we don't mix the two. They're very separate.
It's an unlikely pairing, I guess we'll say, to use a good wine lingo.
Very unlikely pairing. Yeah, and after a long day on the job site in construction, a glass of wine pairs nicely. So they do go together, in their own way.
Right.
But we were here in the history of what we started was 2017. Alana and I were on a journey for 4.5 months. We traveled to 8 nations in that time, and we met while we were in Israel. In the midst of that trip, we met up with some friends of ours from Dallas that were on vacation, essentially. And we were primarily in Jerusalem to pray, to worship, and just to, be there in the land. So one of our friends is really into wine, Elizabeth. I think it was her idea to say, let's go out and have, a wine tasting at some wineries. So we basically got in the car and we drove around, stopped at 3 different wineries in the Shomron, which in English is Samaria. And I had been studying the Bible, primarily focused on the rebirth of Israel and all the prophetic things happening surrounding that, but I had never seen until one of the ladies at one of these wineries pointed out to me Jeremiah 31:5, which basically says that when God puts the Jewish people back in the land of Israel, that they will plant vineyards on the hills of the Shomron, on the hills of Samaria. It's like the most hyper-specific geographical prophecy, and it's related to wine. I mean, it blew my mind that like that would be a sign. And then furthermore, she explained to me that that's really only been happening in the last like 30 years in the Shomron specifically. So it took our breath away. Like we were very we were intrigued. We got home from that trip. One of the guys on the trip with us named Kevin gathered us together, all 5 of us that were in that little tasting group, and said, "Hey guys, I have this idea. And I think we need to bring wine from Israel to the United States and help connect people to what's happening there through wine. There's no one else really doing it. There's a few people selling it on websites, but it's not really a big thing yet." And so that's how, on the back of a napkin, on a little whiteboard in a 6-hour meeting, that's how we hatched the idea of Israeli good wine.
Amazing. Yeah. So you guys, I mean, I want to say you just kind of stumbled upon it. I mean, from the standpoint of you were there as a Christian, traveling, and just, of course, Israel, you were there to study. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, the significance of the land and people of Israel for you as a Christian. But that's just really cool that boom, you were there, you go on a wine tasting, and then the idea is birthed.
Yeah.
Love it. So Daniel, the history and the story of wine in Israel to me is fascinating. It's really an interesting story. Of course, the Bible, as you just mentioned, this text from Jeremiah, but there's lots of other places in the Bible that talks about wine in Israel. Of course, there's in the both the Old Testament and the New Testament. But my understanding is that the wine industry was essentially or largely dead in Israel for several thousand years until fairly recently. So give us the big picture here of how the Israel wine industry started, essentially disappeared, and then in recent times has been revived, essentially.
It's a fascinating story. Every time I come back here, I uncover more and more of it. And this part of our company is what like motivates me the most. I love history. I love archaeology. I love going back and seeing evidence of things that were talked about in the Bible that are like verifiably true with rocks and stones and, artifacts. And so what you said is absolutely true. It's a wine. It's essentially a revival of something that was ancient, that was happening at the time of Jesus, of Yeshua, before him. It was happening for hundreds, if not thousands of years in the land of Israel, in the land of Canaan, before it was even Israel. But there's in the Bible, there's over 212 scriptures about wine. So we know that
212?
212
scriptures that speak about wine. It's amazing. I did not know that. Yeah.
And that's not even counting the ones talking about grapes or vineyards. That's just talking about wine. So, which, by the way, I don't know if anyone else is out there that is of the opinion that Jesus turned water into grape juice. I promise you it was fermented grape juice. Okay. I promise you. All right.
You. I'm glad we resolved that because, yes, I think that theory is – I hope it's just about gone, but it's probably still out there somewhere.
It's alive and well in certain –
It's alive and well. Okay.
So, So going back, let's just go back to the time of Jesus. So at the time when he was walking the earth, we know historically through archaeology, we know that wine was actually one of the most significant parts of the Israeli economy. The reason we know that is if you look at the landscape of Israel, you've got towns, villages, and they've excavated a lot of those. What they have found surrounding them, cut into the bedrock of the land, the Hebrew word is gatot, which means basically an ancient wine press. It's a cutout, usually a square box that they throw the grapes into, and then the grapes get crushed underfoot, and then there's a little channel where the juice would flow into another basin type cutout that then they would draw the wine out of in jars or in containers. And when they counted those throughout the land of Israel, essentially what the conclusion they came to was there were way more of those than what their population would have needed. So the logical conclusion is they were producing more, enough to be exported. And what historians have calculated is they were actually exporting somewhere around 10 times what their actual population consumed. So it tells us a lot of things. It must have been really good for enough people to want to buy that. Furthermore, they found evidence in the Mediterranean, sunken ships that were laden with amphora. That was like the main cargo on the ship was amphora. Amphora is the ancient vessel, clay vessel that would hold wine, specifically made for wine, for aging it, for storing it. I think most people have probably seen pictures of it. You didn't know what it was, but that's what they found. And not just one shipwreck, but multiple shipwrecks in the bottom of the Mediterranean, leaving the port of Yafo. It is. So we know that it was a major part of the economy. And we also know that the Greeks and the Romans and other civilizations that had taken over Israel at certain points, they bragged about that very thing. They bragged about taking the grapes, taking the wine, taking the viticulture, and actually bringing it back to their homeland in the various parts of Europe. A lot of historians are starting to do, or a small number of historians, I should say, are starting to do a lot of research on this topic to locate grapes that were actually indigenous to the land of Israel that were exported to other countries. And there's other countries that have kind of taken those grapes as their own, because they've been there for hundreds of years. But the reality is that a lot of those grapes, one in particular that is very interesting. I'll tell this because it's really interesting. So we went to a winery in the north. Really lovely boutique winery. This guy was visiting his friends in France, and he starts telling us this story because he's pouring us a Cabernet Franc wine. He said, I was at my friend's house in France. They have this encyclopedia set on the shelf. I was bored and I started pulling volumes off, and I found the volume that has all of the viticulture. So every vine grape species is listed, in this old encyclopedia, like really old. I think he said it was something like 100, 150-year-old encyclopedia set. So he's reading through, he gets to the one that talks about Cabernet Franc, and at each vine or each grape species has a drawing of the leaf showing the differences of the structure of the leaf and the different characteristics. And it would list different things about it, one of which is the origin. So he's moving through, this one's from France, this one's from France, this one's from Germany, this one's from Spain, gets to Cabernet Franc, and it said the origin was from southern Syria.
Interesting.
Okay?
Southern Syria.
When that encyclopedia was written, southern Syria is what we now refer to as the Golan Heights, which is actually where I'm at right now. So Cabernet Franc, by the way, if you don't know, is essentially the father of Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon was a hybrid between the Cabernet Franc and the Sauvignon Blanc grapes. Those two were brought together. It's
a parent. It's like a parent to it.
It's a parent. Yeah. So in Cabernet Sauvignon, by the way, is known as the king of all grapes, the most drunk wine worldwide in the last 100 years. So it's a very, very interesting thing.
That's what you got me right here. This is a Drimia Cabernet Sauvignon 2018. So here it is. Yeah, love it.
Yeah,
crazy.
So lots of history in Israel. And as you know, in 70 AD, the Jews, the Second Temple was destroyed. The Jews were expelled from the land, and from that time forward, there was a very small remnant of Jews that have lived there, but the majority were forced out. As it was spoken by the prophets, they were forced out of the land. They were expelled to the north, the south, the east, and the west for roughly over about 1,800 years. Jews began to return in the late 1800s. And right before that, you had the story of famous author Mark Twain. His real name is Samuel Clemens. He wrote a journal describing what he saw in the land. And essentially, I'm paraphrasing it drastically. Everyone should get a copy of it and read it, just so you can see the contrast. He essentially said, this land is forlorn, desolate. It's like basically overrun with thorns and weeds. There's nothing to see here. There's nothing. There's no reason that anyone would want to willingly go to Palestine, as he referred to it. And, don't bother, essentially. Don't come here. And that was that was kind of the nail in the coffin, the last person to make the official declaration that the land was desolated, just as the prophets said it would be. But then a few years later, Jews began to return. And when the God's chosen people began to return, the land responded to their return. Like literally, we begin to see the landscape of Israel change. The weather patterns actually began to change, and more rain began to fall. And here we are, fast forwarding from the 1880s now to 2024, and Israel has planted, I don't know what the number is, it's millions of trees. The landscape is completely changed dramatically in terms of trees. In terms of water, it's changed. They were able to fix all kinds of issues with the swamps and mosquitoes. They've got technology that has allowed the desert to bloom. One of the great things Israel has done is exported this technology, drip irrigation, to other parts of the world to help bring water to places that you could never grow anything. So you literally drive down to the lowest place on earth in the Dead Sea, and you've got rows upon rows upon rows of date palm trees full of fruit, and some of the best fruit, some of the best dates you'll ever eat. It's really a miracle. So the wine story is no different. And it's a beautiful part of that.
Yeah. So, and I know, I'm sure, some of those listening or watching have been to Israel and seen the flourishing agriculture. But from what I understood, though, is that during that 1800 year period, from, 70 AD up until, recent times, when Jews began to once again return in large numbers, to the land of Israel, there was no wine industry during that period, or none that we can really speak of. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. One of the things that happened during the desolate time was that trees and vines were cut down, because during the Ottoman Turkish Empire, they were taxed. Anyone that owned land was taxed for how many trees or vines or fruit-bearing, plants you had on your property. So what did they do? They cut them down. And so they had to be replanted. There was a famous Jewish European man from France who saw this, and it was around the late 1880s. And he said, what's happening in Israel, what's happening in this land is so significant, we have to make sure it succeeds. And so he invested over $20 million of his own fortune, being a very wealthy man in France, owning some of the nicest vineyards. Like to this day, they are considered some of the best vineyards in the world in France.
Yeah.
And sent his viticulturists to Israel to test the soil, to test the topography and the terroir. Terroir is a wine-specific word that has to do with the specificity of all the different elements of the growing capability of the land, the weather, the soil, the rainfall, wind, all those different things. And then they began to experiment with different things, different wines, different grapes, So fast forwarding, Israel became a nation, 1948. We saw a lot more Jewish people moving into the land. At that time, the wine was very unknown. And I would say most people would agree it was not good still at that point. Okay. It was still like really in its infancy. It was a baby with a poopy diaper, if you will. So, sorry.
Yeah.
But as it grew and as it matured, things, people started to realize, hey, we've got the Holy Land. Yeah. Like if anywhere in the world should there be good wine, it should be here.
Yeah.
And so you had different winemakers that took this idea and began to say, you know what, we're going to make a name again for Israel, that just as it was back in ancient times, that Israel was known as the best wine nation, that it will be again. So being in the Golan Heights, I have to mention that one of those wineries was the Golan Heights Winery. I'm about 20 minutes south of it. And they were the first winery. Most people recognize them as the first to actually start winning awards. And so people outside of Israel began to recognize that, hey, there's something interesting going on in Israel again.
Yeah, I want to hear a little bit more about how Israel's wine is respected globally, because it's now, it's we're going to talk a little bit more about the land and where the the regions and what kind of wine is actually coming out of Israel. But on an international level, people that know wine and follow wine, what kind of respect does Israeli wine receive?
It's complicated. So I would say the overall summary is it has a long way to go, and that is primarily because what I would on the surface you would say it's a political reason. I would say more deeply it's a spiritual reason. But Israel categorically, anything made in Israel has been rejected and aggressively, like adamantly rejected by many nations. Unfortunately, a lot of nations have adopted what's known as the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, to specifically reject a lot of products being made in the land of Israel, Judea, Samaria, the Golan Heights, any of the areas that are considered contested. Those areas are especially affected. So a lot of really good wineries are completely excluded at all from some of the international competitions for that one reason. But the competitions that are willing to allow Israeli wines, they are getting amazing awards. I actually just visited 2 days ago Shiloh Winery, which is in the town of Shiloh, ancient Shiloh, where the tabernacle.
Yeah, I've been there. It's fantastic. I love it.
Amazing. It's my number one place. If people say, if I had one place to go in Israel, where would I go to see something biblical? Go to ancient Shiloh.
You can go and see the site, like where the tabernacle history, and go to the wine. Don't they make the Fiddler label of wine? Yeah, the Fiddler. Yeah, I've had Fiddler. I love it.
It's a great wine. He has a whole series, and we actually just got to taste 2 days ago at the inaugural grand opening of their new tasting facility that was a year delayed in the making because of what's happening here in Israel. We got to taste their new wine out of that series, out of the Legend series. So what he's done, his name is Amihai, by the way, Amihai Luria. He has taken an approach to wine with an incredible level of detail, and I would say he nerds out on it. Like, he is so just incredibly compelled to make the best wine that he will not accept anything less. He does not compromise.
Wow.
So when he goes to a competition, I'm regularly getting texts from him. He's winning 90, 92, 93, 95 points on his wine, which anything over 90 is exceptional in the world of wine, in the wine judging system. And I think a few of his wines have gone over 95, that's a really big deal. And that's in international competitions. That's in the decanter competition, which is a well-known one. I believe it's in London. I might be mistaken on that, but so we're beginning to see a lot of people writing about it. Robert Parker, Mark Squires, two of the most foremost wine writers, critics in the industry, have written about Israeli wine very positively, and a lot of people are starting to. It's kind of the new kid on the block. That I think there's going to be very soon a watershed moment, or a falling off the cliff moment, in a good way, in the sense of it's all of a sudden people are going to realize it and everyone's just going to go diving after it. So,
that's exciting, man. So that's fascinating. I never really considered that the anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, BDS, all these movements that affect so many things. I didn't think of it in terms of how it could affect the Israeli wine industry as well. And that some countries are saying, we're just flat out not going to buy your wine and we're not going to let you in our competitions. But what I hear you saying is that when they are allowed in these wine competitions, that they're actually performing quite well.
Exceptionally well. And obviously not all wines are created equal.
Sure.
I wouldn't tell anyone, go to Israel, buy any bottle, and it's going to be good. One of the things that we've tried to do at Israeli Good Wine, I think we've been very successful with this, is that we like to think of ourselves as kind of the Joshua and Caleb going into the land and scouting it out and bringing back to people in the U.S., to live up to our name, Israeli Good Wine, finding things that really stand out, that really speak to the verse, one of my favorite verses in the Bible that says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Like we should actually be able to taste, not just in a metaphorical or a ethereal sense, but literally pick up a glass, pour some wine into it, and taste and see that his promises are true, that he is good, that he is a man of his word.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's beautiful. And oh man, that's exciting. I know at the end, I'm going to have you share a little bit more about what you guys specifically do to bring wine tangibly to people's doorsteps. But of course, they can go to your website, Israeli Good Wine, and essentially you've started like a wine club sort of, but I'll let you explain it. But it's a great way to be able to have people take advantage of your expertise and your heart for the people, the land, and of course, just what's happening with Israeli wine. So, hey, I want to shift gears a little bit and just kind of get even, we're getting real practical, which I love, but just some things that are happening on the ground with the wine industry. So what kinds of wines are being produced in Israel today? I'm sure there's many, but maybe just a few that we might be familiar with. And then also, Daniel, tell us a little bit about the kinds, but also the regions in Israel that are known for just really doing well with wine.
Yeah, great question. So one of the most beautiful things, in my opinion, about the Jewish culture and the Jewish people, and I think it's a God-given thing, is that they will try to do just about anything. They are entrepreneurial by nature. And so I have tasted just about every wine grape that I think is commercially available. They're trying it, and if it didn't work, then they'll try something else. They'll plant a different thing. But a lot of your really popular, well-known grapes, so Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and then in the new and up and coming thing, that's one of the things I'm really excited about, is there's a few researchers, one of which is Dr. Shivi Drori, and he has sent out a team of people a few years ago to find wild grapes, which they hope were some of the original indigenous grapes that survived the Ottoman Empire, and bring those back, and then figure out through testing if these are actually wine grapes or just table grapes. And they have actually narrowed down a few species that they believe are actually ancient wine grapes that are suitable for winemaking, because not every grape is really suitable. The internal components of a grape need to be of a certain acidity and sugar balance and structure within the grape to actually make good wine. So they're finding, like, one in particular that always comes to my mind is this grape called the Bituni grape. I call it the Pinot Noir of Israel. And
and what's it called again, Daniel? Say what's the name of this grape again?
Yeah, it's called the Bituni, B as in Bravo, Ittuni. And it drinks very much like a Pinot Noir. A lot of people, by the way, ask us for Pinot Noir, which that is one of the only grapes that does not do well in Israel. Like, hardly anybody can grow that here. It just is. It's a cold weather grape. Israel is not a cold weather climate. So the Bituni grape, though, is essentially, I think it's better. I think it's even more interesting than Pinot Noir, and they're beginning to cultivate that. And they're doing research with ancient seeds that were found in archaeological sites. Like, they found like broken vessels that would have held wine, and the grape seeds that are still in the bottom of those vessels, extracting the DNA and figuring out if we can, get this restarted, essentially take the ember and build a fire with it.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit about the grapes. There's so many more I could name, but as far as the regions, Israel, like any respectable wine-growing country, is broken into different regions. So in France, for example, you've got Bordeaux, Beaujolais, you have the Rhone, you have Burgundy. in Israel, almost the entire country can grow grapes. The only place that really cannot is the very southern tip. And surprisingly, even in the Negev desert, the northern part of the Negev desert, you have a suitable environment. In fact, a really desirable environment for growing grapes, and because there's a large temperature swing. But beyond the Negev, you have the Judean hills. You have the Samson region that hugs the coast. The Judean hills, by the way, is right around Jerusalem. So a lot of those vineyards probably would have grown wine for the use of the temple. You have the Shomron region, the Sumerian region, which is also, we almost know with certainty that those wines in ancient times were being taken to the temple. North of that, you have the Galilee region, which is kind of divided into the upper and lower Galilee. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the right northeastern side of the country, the Golan, which is where I'm at now, which is personally my favorite. I love the topography of the land. The Golan Heights has really unique volcanic basalt soil, so it has a different texture and minerality that it puts forth in the wine. So each of those regions, if I could, I wish I had more time to break them all down.
Yeah.
But they're all unique, and they all have different things that people are doing, and it's really, really unique what can happen here in this tiny country.
It's amazing. I had no idea that essentially all of Israel, with the exception, you said the southern tip. So you're talking about like Elot, way down, like getting down in that area. But everywhere else can pretty much grow it. I mean, that's. I had heard, I knew about the Judean hills and the Samaria, Shomron, and Golan, but that is amazing that it can even grow. You're telling me it can grow even in parts of the Negev desert.
That's right.
The Judean desert. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
You've got these days where during the day it'll be 100 degrees, 110 degrees, but at night it drops all the way into the mid 50s.
Fascinating.
Fahrenheit.
Right.
And you've got enough temperature swing where the grapes can cool down and pull the acidity back into the grape. During the day, you're ripening with all the sunlight. It's ripening and adding sugars into the grape, so you get the correct balance between acid and sugar. And if there's one thing that's really required in winemaking, it's balance. Everything has to be in balance.
Got it. So one of the things that you shared with me the last time I saw you, and I saw Atlanta a couple weeks ago in Dallas for an event, but when we were in Nashville, you taught me something significant, and that is that not all wineries in Israel produce kosher wine. So there's kosher vineyards, non-kosher vineyards, and it's all the process. So. Without getting too detailed into it, but I found that very interesting because my wrong assumption was that all wineries in Israel would be producing kosher. But I just wanted to take that opportunity to for you to maybe even explain to our listeners what makes a wine kosher or non-kosher, and because you can go like this wine. Take this one right here. This is from the Yatir Hills, but this on the back has this OU symbol. So this is clearly a kosher wine. It's even kosher for Passover. But tell us what makes a wine kosher or not.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm still researching. I'm a follower of Jesus myself. So I am not an expert in Judaism, disclaimer. But I love researching these topics. If you look strictly at the Torah, the Torah prescribes two main things for wine to be considered, kosher, and just strictly in terms of the Torah. Those two things are that you don't take any fruit from the vines for the first 3 years that the vine has been planted. Right. You let all that fruit fall. The second thing is that you respect and honor the Shemitah year, the seventh Sabbath year, and let the land rest. And you don't take, for the commercial purposes, you don't take any of those grapes. I believe, if I remember right, that you're allowed to allow people to go in. The poor can go in and take what they want. The birds, the wildlife can go in, but the land needs to rest.
So it has to lay. I think some of the translations say it has to lay fallow.
Yes.
The land is,
yes.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So, um, the now going a little bit deeper into the oral tradition from the Talmud, we see that there's a an emphasis, because when the Jews were out of the land of Israel for so long, they had to be a lot more careful with, like making sure that things weren't going into the wine and tainting the wine. And actually, and there was, unfortunately, in history, in the long history of anti-Semitism throughout the many years, there was sadly very heinous things done out of hatred towards Jewish people, just to for spite, or just simply for the purpose of hatred, such as trying to taint their food or their wine with things that were clearly not kosher. So so the main thing that now that we consider kosher here is that a Shabbat observant male Jewish person is the one that, from the moment that the grapes are crushed, that essentially when the juice flows out of the grapes, that's the moment that it has to be completely handled by a person who is Sabbath observant. And even when it's fermenting in the barrels, and then from the time that it's opened in the bottle, out of the bottle, that a person who is observing the Sabbath and correctly honoring that wine is that's essentially what maintains its kashrut, its kosher status. So it's very interesting, and there's a lot of other interesting parts of it you could get into historically, and how those things really, we can see God's hand using those things to make sure that His way was preserved. But yeah, the ones that, to me, the one that really rings true because of the history, with Israel being exiled from Babylon, is the Shemitah year. Is really like we want to find people that we're working with that think in terms of a culture of rest, that they are allowing rest in their own lives, allowing rest in all of their activities, and especially with what they're doing with their vineyards. And I just believe in that. It's such a powerful way to live. So
so it's no, that was a good overview, and I think it just highlights that this process, wine, people who make wine, I'm sure just any vineyard, they're going to take pride in it. They want to produce wine. Is a really amazing. It's an amazing journey, I guess, just from start to finish. But from the standpoint of Judaism, it's really seen as a holy endeavor, and because obviously we drink wine in association with times of joy, and whether it's on Friday night or to start a holiday or to end a Sabbath, wine is such a big deal. So I think it's very interesting, and it makes a lot of sense that even the process is considered in Jewish tradition and custom to be something holy.
Yeah. It's a very cool. Sacred.
Sacred's a great word.
Yeah, it's the only beverage that is truly sacred in Judaism. And there's a whole study I encourage people to do. There's such an amazing study you can do on that. And for those of us that believe in Jesus or Yeshua as the Messiah, the connections between Him and wine and what He did in history are remarkable. And one of the things that I would say is very worth studying.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. So, Dano, I know that wine, of course, it's become, a huge part of your life. And that was even before you guys started Israeli Good Wine. And I know it's become sort of the means in which you're now connected to the land of Israel. But even apart from wine, I know that for you, connecting to the land and the people of Israel is very important to you as a Christ follower, as a Christian. So tell us a little bit about, just kind of pulling the lens back a little bit. Would just love to hear, your thoughts as far as the importance of that connection and the connection between your faith and the land and the people of Israel, and why you want to help others to feel that connection. Because if I'm understanding Israeli Good Wine, it is about good wine, but it's also about giving people a sense of connection. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh man, that's a amazing and huge topic, and you'll have to probably hold your hand up or tell me to stop because
I'll do this. I'll bang, and when you need to stop. No, you're good. Go for it, man.
So, I grew up in an amazing Christian household, great parents that love the Lord, and also in great churches. But I never, until I was in my early 20s, I never really studied the roots of why we follow Christ as an American Western Christian. Why do we believe He is the Messiah? Why do we do all these things that we do? Why do we take communion? Why do we worship in a certain way? So for me, I had to go on that journey, and what that looked like for me was going back to the beginning, which is started in the land of Israel, essentially, where He had His word written, and so I would say, as it connects to the land is nothing without its people. The land is, without the people that God made the promise to, the land is just an empty space. And so as I've grown in my understanding, I would say the beauty of the land is actually His promise to the people that inhabit the land. And I just read a beautiful statement recently that says that, if you believe in God and you believe that He is a faithful God, then you have to believe. Like, it is absolutely a non-negotiable to you have to believe that He is faithful to the people that He first made covenant with, which was Israel, and with Abraham, the father of the Jewish faith. Like, if that falls apart, then the whole thing about Him falls apart. So, over the years, you've had, different elements of the church that have tried to separate the land and the Jewish people and Israel. They've tried to separate that from, the Christian faith. And they are inseparable. Absolutely. You have to see it through that lens. You have to understand His faithfulness through that lens. If you don't, there's no point. And it all falls apart, in my opinion. But the beauty is that you can see it, and you can actually come here, and out of all the places on planet Earth, you can walk on the place that really on the very land where He said He put His name, and you can see people that He prophesied about through prophets from 2,700 years ago: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Amos, Zechariah, on and on. In the Psalms, they prophesied about these people being God's chosen people and being able, after they've been dispersed through all the nations, to come back once again to the land and re-inhabit the land with His promises being connected to it. And those of us that are followers of Yeshua, followers of Jesus, that we are able to be grafted into that promise. So it's, I think we've taken so much of an overbearing or thinking too highly of ourselves in the West, and and really kind of stepping back in humility and saying, wow, like, my King, my Messiah, Jesus, is a Jewish King. He was one from the line. He was the Lion of the tribe of Judah, a descendant of David, King David. That's His origin. He's never stopped being Jewish. He's never stopped being a Jewish king, and He will always be. So, that was really where I started the journey, and I've continued it ever since. I love learning, and I'll never stop learning, hopefully.
I love it. Daniel, I have another question that came to mind that I want to press in on. It wasn't in our show notes, but I think this is probably something that you've thought through and you experience it all the time. But for you as a Christian, being in the land of Israel, among Jews and Israelis and so forth, do you feel welcome there? How are you received as a Christian in the land of Israel? And even with what you're doing with your organization, how do Jews in the land, maybe even at the wineries that know what y'all are doing, how do they receive kind of what you guys stand for?
Oh man, that's such a good question. And I would say I've been able to come here since, like I said, since 2010, and I've actually seen I've observed a drastic change in those 14 years. Like literally in a decade and a half, I've seen people that before were much more standoffish and skeptical and even aggressive. I have some kind of wild stories of people being aggressively against me being in their land, in their promised land. It's another story for another day, but now I think, now and also with what happened last year on October 7th, which we were here, by the way, and woke up in Jerusalem on October 7th, 2023 to the sound of sirens. We were in the bomb shelter 6 times that day. Now more than ever, I believe that when people come here and they express true friendship, and they're expressing, a place of not coming to take or not coming to, to try to receive something, but coming with a heart of giving and a heart of honor, then people 100% respond to that. Everyone that I know of, whether it's, Jewish people, secular Jewish people, religious Jewish people, everyone needs a friend, and they recognize that when they see it in people. And across the board, not just in the Jewish community, in the Arab community as well. The friends of mine there as well, they want friends. And I would say, everyone should come. But when you come, obviously come in the right timing. Now may not be the best time for you to come because of the situation here, but come with a heart to receive, but also to give, and to find a way to extend friendship here.
Yeah. No, that. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's important for people to hear on so many different levels of just kind of how you guys have just gone there with the heart to give and to bless, and that, that's won you a lot of friends in the land. So I think that's really powerful. Daniel, I want to kind of bring this to a close. I know you're in Israel right now. You're 7 hours ahead, and you got a lot going on over there right now. But talk to us a little bit here about how Israeli good wine works. Like just kind of what you guys do, how you bring the land, how do you get the wine from there to here, and just kind of what sort of your, how people can connect and benefit from what you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So first and foremost, we exist to help build the nation of Israel and to further, undergird what God is doing here. And that's our main hope, our main prayer, that if we achieve that goal, if we're in alignment with what He's doing and His purpose and promise, then we would say we've been successful. So, we started from the beginning just saying, let's take bottles of wine, and, in my way of thinking about it, these are like 750 milliliter messages in a bottle. They're messages talking about His truth, in a world of narratives and of messaging and of marketing and media. There is a clear and a very resounding message that when you hear it, when you hear His truth and then connect to it through something like wine, it really affects you, really changes you. And, and I'm not just talking about drinking too much wine. That can change you too. So
that can change you too.
Yeah.
No, I hear you. We got you. We're tracking.
Too much. So, but really, the phrase he gave me was, this is liquid prophecy. So that's like, if there's one thing I want people to walk away thinking about, is that you can actually taste and see that the Lord is good. You can taste what His prophets said from 2,700 years ago. So practically, we come here usually once or twice a year. We go to a lot of different wineries. We go to wine festivals here so that we can, talk with a lot in one setting. And we're tasting anywhere from 20 to 60 wines a day sometimes, which a lot of my friends
sounds like fun, man. I'm in.
Everyone's like, that sounds like the best job ever. And I'm like, yeah, except when you have to spit it out, and then I have to drive. I don't have a personal chauffeur yet. So,
yeah.
So we're tasting it. We're deciding. We're taking copious amounts of notes, that's my wife. Thank God, she is a great note taker and very diligent with
Oh,
that.
she's so
Alana, and she,
organized.
by
I
the
know.
way,
Yeah.
we have discovered she actually has the best like ability to taste. She is the really very gifted in that. So, usually three of us will sit down. We take our initial notes. We go back to the States. We bring samples back home. I mean, we've had like 6 suitcases full of wine we brought back before. And we bring those to another set of people that are really qualified wine experts in the United States that we have a relationship with. And we let them review it. And we say, what do you guys think about these? And so it goes through an elimination process, if you will. And, only the fittest survive in a sense. But we really focus on bringing things that have a story, that have meaning, that have purpose, that are really, building the land. We try to work with a lot of boutique wineries, small wineries that that are really, grassroots, that have, something special and unique. And then we get it on a container. We pray for good weather, and it goes over the ocean for roughly a month, and hopefully shows up, unbroken and undamaged, which by the grace of God, we had a miracle. The last time we imported back, it arrived. It was supposed to arrive in May, didn't arrive until, I believe it was the middle of June. And it sat in Houston during a hurricane that had hit Houston, and the power was out in Houston. And we just prayed, and we said, we need a temperature miracle. And somehow nothing was spoiled. We tasted through all the wine. Nothing was ruined. It was absolutely a miracle. And so that's what we do. We bring it in. And then the main thing, like obviously anyone can go on our website. They can buy wine a la carte. You can buy a bottle, 2 bottles, which pro tip, by the way, if you're going to do that, buy at least 4, 5, 6 bottles, because then you're paying, you're getting the most bottles for the least amount of shipping cost. Sure. That's the most efficient way to do it shipping wise. But the really the best way to do it, if you taste it and you're like, hey, I like this, I really like what they're doing, is to become a member of our wine club subscription, which is where you can sign up to get a box every 3 months. You can get 3 boxes a year. We have a new subscription where you can just get one, like basically a box for the major holidays. But we have a lot of people that observe the Shabbat every week, and so they get our case subscription of 12 bottles, so that they've got basically one bottle a week for the whole year. Is how it works out, and it keeps them well stocked, and then of course, if you're a member, you get better discounts, and we do what I'm really excited about, and this is actually what I've been doing here in the Golan, is we love telling the story. So actually yesterday I filmed in 3 different locations up here in the Golan Heights. I filmed the stories of the winemakers that we've been working with. And yesterday was pretty emotional. Actually, as everyone knows, this last year has been just devastating for Israel, very difficult, especially economically. And I told them, when you go on camera and share your story, just be real. Yeah, just tell it. Just share the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's been really hard. And so I say that to say, this is a great time for people to put your money where your mouth is, and step up and buy wine through us, but also find other ways to support the Israeli economy. Buying other products from Israel, making sure that any chance you get to talk about it with your friends and family, and at the dinner table, open a bottle of wine and have this conversation. We have one friend that buys a subscription strictly to give away as gifts, because he's like, man, I have a gift on my shelf at all times that is super interesting, and no one else is going to have that gift. You can't get it at Walmart. You can't get it at Target. And, that's what we do. IsraeliGoodWine.com. Become a member. We do a lot of other stuff. You can read about all the details of the membership. But more than anything, we want people to stay connected to Israel, and to stay connected to the heart of God for Israel.
Yeah.
So I think
No, thank you for explaining that, Daniel. I want to encourage folks too to check out the website. It's really well done, and they've got some great videos which will help you to get to know Daniel and his wife Atlanta and their team better. And I'm looking forward to those. Hopefully, those videos that you took yesterday will be available soon, because I think the stories of those who are running these various vineyards, from the boutiques to the big ones, they're fascinating. How every one of them's got a crazy story about how they started, getting the wine going again in Israel. It's wonderful.
They really do. Yeah.
Love it. So, hey, Daniel, thank you again for joining me. I love what you guys are doing. One of the main features of the Game Changers Forum is to highlight people who are changing the game in the area. One of the areas, of course, we talk about all the time is building bridges between Christians and Jews. And you guys are doing that by helping, so many people connect to the land and people of Israel, as you say, one bottle time. So, hey, l'chaim to you and your team, and just really grateful. Safe travels home, and just appreciate you guys. Keep up the great work.
Man, thank you so much, Ryan. Honored to be with you guys. And I have to say also, the Feast of Tabernacles, so happy Sukkot to everyone out there that's celebrating Sukkot. I'm going to go back into the Sukkah here in a minute. But, man, thank you again.
You got it, Daniel. Thanks. Well, thanks for listening to today's show. Hey, let me know what you think in the comments section, and you can take your interest to the next level by heading over to ryanlambertforum.com and signing up for the Game Changers Forum email, which is a short and sweet email I send every 2 weeks that include brief game-changing ideas. And if you've benefited from this talk, take a moment to share this episode with someone else who would find it helpful. Then don't forget to subscribe. And if you're on YouTube, do me a favor and click that like button and the notification bell so that you'll know when the next episode drops. So we'll be back soon with more game-changing ideas for a life well lived.